Welcome back to the General Hospital Spoilers channel. Today, we dive deep into a terrifying escalation that puts the entire power structure of Port Charles at risk. In a world where vendettas rarely die and bloodlines are both sacred and cursed, one man's pursuit of vengeance has triggered a chain reaction that may be impossible to stop. What begins as a covert ambush quickly spirals into a war without end, burning not only homes but legacies to the ground. After weeks of mounting pressure and betrayal, Sonny had finally reached his breaking point. The once calculated mob boss, who built his empire on quiet intimidation and ruthless precision, was no longer content with strategic silence. Sidwell had crossed a line too dangerous to ignore, one that left not just Sonny's pride in shambles, but his future hanging in the balance. As whispers of Sidwell's latest deception reached Sonny's ears, the fire in his chest erupted into something far darker. He wasn't coming for a conversation. He was coming for revenge. But Sidwell had not survived in the shadows all these years by being reckless. He knew Sonny's rage better than most. He understood that when Sonny moved, he moved like a thunderclap, swift, unrelenting, and lethal. That's why Sidwell did what no one expected: he vanished. Or more precisely, he moved his loyal forces underground. In a series of abandoned warehouses along the outskirts of Port Charles, Sidwell positioned his men, weapons, and resources. They were waiting, not for peace, but for war. By the time Sonny and his men stormed what was thought to be Sidwell's primary compound, the house was empty. Not a guard, not a footstep, not a breath. It was a ghost, already hollowed out, a trap left for one purpose: misdirection. Enraged, Sonny torched the property. Fire consumed everything. The art, the marble, the curated evidence of Sidwell's power. It was a message, not just to Sidwell, but to anyone who dared cross Sonny again. But Sonny knew the truth: this was not a victory. It was the opening volley in a war that would leave no one untouched. In the days that followed, Port Charles changed. Streets that once pulsed with whispered threats now echoed with the clang of quiet preparations. Everyone was choosing sides, even those who claimed neutrality. Jason, long caught between his loyalty to Sonny and his own moral compass, could feel the scales tipping. Anna, with her WSB background, knew what was coming, and it terrified her. This wasn't just a turf war. This was a civil collapse masked in silence. Sidwell's men emerged not with guns drawn, but with strategy. They infiltrated businesses, lured allies with promises of independence from Sonny's shadow, and offered protection to those too weak to refuse. In less than a week, half the local economy was being courted by Sidwell's influence. What Sonny held through fear, Sidwell began to take through persuasion. But persuasion backed by blackmail and threat was still war, just waged with a different kind of blade. Unable to accept such a calculated invasion, Sonny retaliated with brute force. In one night, 3 safe houses aligned with Sidwell went dark. No one spoke of the bodies found. No one asked why there were no survivors. And still, Sidwell did not flinch. He sent a single package to Sonny, inside, a photograph of Carly, taken the day before, walking alone in Rice Park. No words. Just the implication. The war no longer had rules. As Sonny doubled his security, Carly began to unravel. She knew Sidwell's reach, and she knew Sonny's obsession. He would not rest until Sidwell was ash in the wind, even if it meant sacrificing everything they had left. Even if it meant sacrificing himself. Jocelyn begged her mother to leave Port Charles, to take Donna and go somewhere safe. But Carly refused. Leaving meant admitting Sidwell had won. And for her, Sonny's war wasn't just about pride, it was about legacy. They had built their lives, their family, their empire in this city. And if it burned, they would burn with it. Meanwhile, Dex, once Sonny's most trusted inside man, found himself caught in a bind. Sidwell's people had reached out. They knew about his time in prison. They knew about his estranged brother. They offered safety, leverage, power. All he had to do was stop protecting Sonny. But Dex wasn't a traitor. He was, however, a survivor. And in a war where the only rules were survival and sacrifice, he began to walk the line no one dared admit existed: neutrality. As the body count rose and the city's emergency services began to strain under the pressure, Laura, desperate to salvage what little order remained, called a summit. She invited both Sonny and Sidwell, on neutral ground: no weapons, no threats. A truce, at least on the surface. Sidwell declined, sending a message through a courier. Sonny didn't even respond. What followed was perhaps the darkest week in Port Charles history. Explosions echoed near the docks as warehouses burned to the ground. A child was injured in the crossfire of a failed hit attempt on a councilman aligned with Sonny's syndicate. Elizabeth, working around the clock at GH, could barely keep up with the emergency surgeries. The hospital itself became a target of rumors, that Sidwell planned to poison the supply chain, that Sonny intended to use the hospital as a trap. The fear became oxygen. At the center of it all, Michael made a choice no one expected. Tired of watching his family unravel, and fueled by old bitterness against Sonny's world, he reached out to Sidwell. Not to side with him, but to end the war another way. From within. But Sidwell was smarter than Michael anticipated. He knew Michael's bloodline. He knew the weight his betrayal would carry. And he made him an offer: disappear. Leave Port Charles. Take Willow and the children and vanish. Sidwell promised peace, at least for Michael's family, if he vanished before the war reached its final crescendo. Michael didn't answer. But he didn't return home either. Meanwhile, Ava, ever the opportunist, began aligning herself with Sidwell's new territory. She opened her gallery doors to high-level meetings. She lent her influence in the arts community to bolster Sidwell's narrative, that Sonny's reign was antiquated, dangerous, and barbaric. But Ava knew better than anyone: every revolution is built on blood, not ballots. The final straw came on a storm-drenched Tuesday. Sonny's penthouse was breached. No lives were lost, but the message was unmistakable. No one, not even Sonny Corinthos, was beyond reach. That night, Sonny stood in the rain, staring at the wreckage of what used to be his sanctuary. And then he gave the order. No more warnings. No more discretion. Port Charles was now a battlefield. In the days that followed, silence fell. Not peace, just exhaustion. Too many deaths. Too many betrayals. Too many lines crossed. But under that silence, a new power was forming. Not Sonny. Not Sidwell. But something else. Something born from the ashes of their war. A new syndicate, unnamed, invisible. Recruiting the children of the fallen, arming the forgotten, waiting for both empires to bleed out before claiming the city as their own. The war for power had not ended. It had evolved. It had shed its skin and become something worse, something endless. Because in Port Charles, power isn't transferred. It's inherited. And vengeance? Vengeance is immortal.